Hello and welcome to The Debrief. I'm your host, Seth Wrestler.
I'm Becky Scarcello.
The other host.
The other host.
I'm sorry, it should be co-host. That's the
technical. Yes.
Look, this is the show where we meet the creatives who are shaping Detroit. And today, what we're going to be talking about is land use. Here's what I mean. This pandemic is changing the way that we are thinking about how we use land. For example, a lot of people working from home these days.
Yeah, not everybody, but so many more than before.
I know I am. I'm working from home a lot. And so there's this big question out there of what that's going to mean for commercial real estate once the pandemic's all over. Are people going to come back into the office? What is it going to mean for the restaurants and all the different places that are around all those office parks? What's going to happen? And we really don't know yet. It's not just commercial real estate that people are thinking about, or at least not just office buildings that people are thinking about. It's also something that people are rethinking in the restaurant business.
Yeah. And Detroit is one of those cities that has a whole lot of land that is not being used.
So today we're going to talk to a restaurant owner, somebody who opened a restaurant during the pandemic. And it's completely outdoors.
Yeah.
Michigan's first completely outdoor restaurant is called EastEats, and it was voted Metro Detroit's best outdoor dining for 2021. Want to welcome back to the show a guy who's been on before, Kwaku Osei-Bonsu. Thank you for coming on.
Hello.
Thanks, guys. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start here. Describe for everybody the concept and the feel of EastEats.
Absolutely. EastEats is located on Detroit's east side in one of its oldest neighborhoods, Jefferson Chalmers. And so being that is the case, we try to embrace the community as much as we possibly could. I live behind EastEats essentially because EastEats is built on a side lot that was purchased because it was adjacent to my home. And so the neighborhood is very much so reflected in EastEats, and so we did a lot of upcycling to make sure that it reflected the ways in which Detroit has evolved in so many ways, right? And so even in all of the furniture, you'll see that we've used shipping crates for tables, we've used wire spools for stools, we've used church pews as benches and additional seating, and so it's a very rustic feel, and I think it's a little bit of a surprise when you enter the neighborhood. You don't exactly expect that it'll be there, and it kind of makes you, break your neck a little bit to figure out what's going on behind this fortress, if you will.
Yeah. So you open a brand new restaurant literally from nothing and in a neighborhood on a piece of land. What do you think this example is saying about how we use land in the city, and what kind of example does that set for others?
Well, with Detroit having so much vacant land, and so much of it being available to its residents by way of programs like the Side Lot program, I think it's setting a precedence and saying that there's an opportunity for us to take a look at this land, much of which is zoned R1 residential, and maybe even consider rezoning it for mixed use, but still offering the same incentives to the residents of the city so that they have an opportunity that's very unique to create something that is commercial right in their neighborhoods. It's something that can really pour into the neighborhood itself, wherever it is located. But it's also an opportunity for people who wouldn't maybe be shut down because of like permit issues, zoning issues, or, just really may not have the capital to go out there and buy a piece of commercial land or, invest in a building of some sort to have an opportunity.
Right. So you've got a background in restaurants. You started Detroit Black Restaurant Week. You've worked in a lot of restaurants, but beyond that, what even sparked this idea? It's really out of the box.
Yeah. I think that I always said at some point that I would own a restaurant of my own. One day I always said I wanted to turn a school bus into a cafe. My sister went to Rhode Island School of Design, and we always talked about doing that with one another. That's kind of our pet project. But, through undergrad, I left Detroit back in 2009 for college, went to Howard University in DC, and there I met Lloyd Talley, who is my business partner in this venture, but who's originally from New York. And so being that he's from New York, he saw a lot of the things that were happening in New York. And one of the things that was happening was that they had these dome structures on top of high rises and skyscrapers to kind of offer an outdoor dining experience for people in New York City. And he's like, well, if we can put this on top of a skyscraper, we can definitely put this on the ground. And,
Right.
I was like, well, if we can put this on the ground, then let's try doing something that's different. Let's put it somewhere where you haven't seen it before. I think in Detroit, we're definitely not the first people to have domes. You've got Bobcat Bonnie's, as well as a few different establishments that run like Campus Marshes. But I will say that I think where they're placed and the fact that they're in a neighborhood and that they embrace the neighborhood, it's not a situation that excludes anyone from this neighborhood. Even the price point is something that is very welcoming to the people of this neighborhood. We came together and saw an opportunity there. Now, I will say it wasn't necessarily so that we were going to do this anyway if it weren't for the pandemic. I think that when the pandemic occurred, we were like, this is necessary. Like,
perfect.
We kind of, I don't know, it was the That's So Raven moment. I think we both were just like, hey, if we don't do something now, like, there's going to be nowhere to eat. Like, nowhere to eat. And I mean, I think this part of Jefferson was already kind of a food desert. Like, we have Parkway Foods, which is great, a wonderful local grocery store that's in the neighborhood. But as far as like dining out, you kind of have to almost go to Grosse Pointe for a lot of these different options. And so, it was nice in our minds to come up with a concept like this, but then it became necessary. And so we just responded quickly. We responded very fast.
You describe it as the That's So Raven moment. I think of it like the A-Team. Like, it's that moment where everybody whips out their blowtorches and just takes a bunch of fish tanks and converts them into these domes that you can eat in or something like that.
Yeah. So it was a whole lot more than you just wanting to work from home. It's literally
No, at the time I think Lloyd ended up moving to Detroit. He got a fellowship at University of Michigan. Lloyd's got a PhD in developmental psychology. And so, he was moving to Michigan for that reason. I'm a milliner. I've been making hats for some time now and was finally getting into it on my own and saying, you know what, I think I'm going to put my head down and really focus in on my craft. And so we just kind of like ran into each other by way of him moving here. We used the same realtor to purchase our homes. He lives in the Bagley neighborhood off Livernois, and I'm over here in Jefferson Chalmers. And so, like I said, it was a very just like friendly venture. Like, we're going to start a restaurant, and it became like, we're going to save the food industry, because clearly it changed from like restaurant to like, let's save ourselves.
A bigger picture. Yeah. So this model didn't exist. Like, how did you go about figuring out how to make it happen?
Well, it was very much so trial and error. We have actually pivoted quite a few times since opening, right? As far as it being outdoors, that was kind of one of the only options we had. We didn't have the capital to go and buy a brick and mortar, right? But it was also a situation where we're like, okay, how do we make this work and make it so that it's a model that can be more than a restaurant? Like, we've had so many different types of programming here, just because of the nature of the space, that I will challenge ourselves in saying, like, is this a restaurant, or is this, I think it's a very flexible space where sometimes we serve food, sometimes it's for block club meetings, sometimes it's for senior art time, sometimes it's for like kids summer camps. It just really depends on like what we're doing. But when it came down to the model itself, we were continuously pivoting. So in the beginning, we were running a dim sum style of serving, where we were walking around with trays and like offering food to guests kind of one at a time. And that was very fun from an awareness standpoint, because I think it got guests very curious to know more about what we were serving. And also our food items were named after Detroiters that were very impactful to our community. But then we pivoted. There was a time where we were working from a food truck, and it bottlenecked our restaurant very quickly because the guest count exceeded the amount of food we could put out that window within a certain amount of time very quickly. And so we switched over to a kitchen, and in doing that, again, made another pivot. We're like, okay, we can turn this kitchen into a ghost kitchen, create the food here, and then cater it directly to the restaurant. And in doing that, it made like shorter wait times for food. Food was hotter when it landed at the table. It was a more like no contact and COVID friendly model. There were just so many things that changed for the better when we finally and quickly made changes. I think speed was our number one factor to success, I would say.
Right.
You mean fail quickly? You mean when something's not working?
Fail super
you
fast.
Switch. Yeah. Get that out of the way.
It's just like, all right. Oh, that's not working. Okay, let's try this. Oh, that's not working. Let's try this. And, we were kind of racing against the communication barriers, letting our guests know in enough time to say, like, hey, we're changing our model again. Oh, sorry, we're changing our model again. And so, once people caught on to the changes and they saw that they were for the better, I think that, we ended up in a better place too. So
just embraced it. Yeah.
I have to know, did any of the foods named after Detroiters fail? Like, were the Aretha burritos just not a success, or the Kwame flapjacks?
No. That part was cool.
At the time, so, EastEats is called EastEats because we're bridging the Eastern Hemisphere with the east side of Detroit. And so, all of it at the time was Southeastern Asian street style tacos. And so, it was very interesting, I think, to have items named after Detroiters, because what you get, I would say the items did fine. What you get, though, is you get visitors who maybe like knew some of the people or are related to some of the people, and they're like, "Well, what do you know about?" Like they're like, "Well, what do you know?" And I would say that our service, more than anything, we're getting quizzed on the spot.
Right.
And so it was a challenge there, and making sure, okay, guys, like we're gonna have tests and quiz, like a quiz when you first get hired, to make sure that you really know about what you're serving, and who it's named after, essentially. And so I would say we didn't have too many issues with the food or food quality in that regard, but you better know who you're talking about.
Right.
The names off the table. So
what are the dishes? Who do we need to know? Give us an example.
So,
well, they've pivoted for us. But.
Yeah, we pivoted, but we have the James Boggs. We've had, Lottie the Body.
Yes, I had that. Yeah.
Yes, we had a slew of people. Well, we were just trying to make sure that people knew that, while there are the Arethas of the Motor City, there are also so many other people.
Exactly.
That have contributed to the community, and maybe they may not be celebrities, but they definitely shine, and I think that their changes will live beyond their existence here. So
yeah. So the city of Detroit itself, and just COVID rules, like state rules, I mean, those threw you some curveballs, right? They created issues for you. Tell us more about that, the pitfalls and.
Absolutely. Well, I would say it created issues and opportunities. It's very interesting. Being that we were outdoor when Governor Whitmer made her initial announcement of like outdoor dining, we were one of the few restaurants that could remain open.
Yeah.
Which was really fantastic. But again, the restrictions also became a little bit more tight. And so it was like, having to make sure that mask usage on guests and employees was enforced, to the T, having to make sure that we truly were like a contactless experience. Those were all like pivots that we just had to continue making. But I think it was all for the better, like it was a challenge because you're like, okay, where do I get these things? Well, how do I get them? And how do they get there here quickly? Because we're open today, but I think that once they were implemented, we could see, oh, okay, I'm really glad that we did that because, just putting yourself in like the guest shoes, you're in a dome, you want the dome to be not only clean, you want to make sure that like you're not putting yourself at risk. And, this is a destination for a lot of people. People come here to celebrate anniversaries, birthdays, graduations. And like, for a lot of people, this was also the first place they had been out in a year.
Right.
So they're like, this is the first restaurant I've been to, and we didn't want to let them down. You know what I mean? Like, don't let this be the first place you go to coming out of the house, and the next thing you know, you're like sniffling. You know what I mean? Like, that's not, you don't want that experience. And so, yeah.
Exactly. So just to sum up, it sounds like your top advice is positivity because you're just radiating that, like you got it.
Yeah.
But what other advice would you give to people just kind of trying to create a new model of land use?
Well, I would definitely say when it comes to land use, it's definitely about it. Unfortunately, it's still a who you know situation to some extent, right? Make sure that you're making those connections with the key players in each of the departments that you're going to be coming in contact with, because like, you'd rather be having a conversation with them when the heat isn't on, right? Like you're not already open for business. You're not like, you don't have a calendar full of reservations that are like trying to like figure out how to make this concept work. You've already got it on paper and you're walking through a plan. And because you have an example in us, don't be afraid. I was a teacher for middle school at one point. I always talk about like the kid in the back of the class talking. And you can always bet that if there's a kid in the back of the class talking, they're never alone. But teachers always seem to have a hard time just pointing out one kid instead of like both kids. And I'm saying like, use us as an example. Like we are really looking to set precedents here because we want to see a difference in land use here in Detroit. Again, like, Proposal N just passed not too long ago. You're going to see a lot of these different opportunities. being offered to people that aren't necessarily within the city. So I think this is a unique opportunity for us to still include residents. And so it's like, be like that kid in the back of that class. Like, I was the only one talking, you know what I mean? Like, if EastEats can do it, then how can this work for me? And I think the city has a unique opportunity to work with those people and say, all right, let me hold your hand through this process so that we can approve you and make sure that you still are checking all the boxes necessary for health, zoning, all of the departments, but that you're not like kind of shunned away by default because you either don't know the right people or the bureaucracy as far as the paperwork and trying to figure out when it should be turned in, where it should be turned in, and who it should be turned into, the fees associated, explaining those fees, and maybe even offering some sort of subsidies to the people that are residents. You know, I think we have a lot of opportunity here. And so I would say, you know, as far as advice to the person that's interested, like, make sure you know your departments, make sure you have your paperwork in order, make sure you're going by the book. But then also, you know, I think to an extent, it's also a question of, is this a right fit for your community, right? And so doing that legwork ahead of time. For us, we did a lot of that. I was going to my neighbors like, hey, this is what I'm doing over here. A lot of them were coming to me because they saw domes. They're like, wait, what are you doing? Like,
what is that thing?
What kind of playhouse is that?
And I'm like, well, come on in, like, take a walk through, like, come and see, like, what do you think what kind of programs do you want to see here? Like, what should this space be used for? And a lot of them were throwing us thumbs up from the beginning because they felt included. And I think that's like the number one part of the conversation. You can't just throw up a restaurant in the middle of a neighborhood and be like, yeah, open for business. Meanwhile, there's a lady that lives next door. You know what I mean? That's like, I did not say that this is what I wanted. And you can bet that in any sort of a hearing or a conversation around a permit, that they're going to ask, does the community want this? Do your neighbors want this? Can you get a petition signed even, right? To say that people around you approve of something like this. And so, you know, I would say doing that legwork ahead of time is very important because you can bet that you're going to be met with those questions. And it's always easier to navigate that space if you already have an answer than it is to say, oh, let me figure it out. Because then you know. So.
All right, Kwaku, we've got one last thing for you before you go. Are you ready?
Right. Yes.
Okay, Kwaku Osei-Bonsu, co-owner of EastEats. Who is a Detroit creative we all should know about?
I would say you definitely need to know about the Imani Mixon. She is known as the City Proper on Instagram, a fantastic journalist and writer here in the city. She's done amazing work with the Motown Museum, Margot Robbie. She's done so many things. Wow, I can't even say. I've known Imani for years. She has been an integral part in my understanding, I would say, of the culture here in Detroit. I think, you know, when we think about her writing about techno and it being Black and its roots here in the city of Detroit, I think that she, in many ways, is a griot that is like ahead of her time. She has so much to say, and I think it's worth listening to. And I think that if you aren't listening to Imani, there's a part of the heartbeat of Detroit that you're missing. I'm sorry, you're having a heart attack over there.
All right, Kwaku. Look, people can go check out the restaurant and make reservations over at EastEats.us. Go check it out, and it's
so good.
Fantastic outdoor dining. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
That's it for us. I want to remind you that there's a ton of different ways you can find the show: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even our own mobile app, or you can ask Alexa. I am Seth Ressler.
I'm Becky Scarcello.
Until next time, Detroit's moving.
Keep up.